got you involved in dogs in the first place?
I won't go too early. I've always loved dogs and been obsessed with dogs since I was a kid. As a child, I was always jealous. Every kid should grow up with a dog. It's just something that I can remember as my earliest childhood memory. My father was not very comfortable with dogs, being European background and his history. So dogs were out of the question, even though my mom grew up and liked dogs. So as an early child, so I got my first dog at 17. We finally wore down my father, and it was a Rottweiler. I always was like, to me, a dog was an actual dog. It wasn't like a, smaller breed. I was a young kid too, the whole macho thing. So I wanted a tough dog, something to match my attitude, which was kind of ordinary at the time.
Sure.
So Rottweilers were popular, and what I knew, this was in the, I was young, preteen. So this was, I was 90s or mid 90s, right? So Rottweilers was the it dog. So it had dysplasia anyway. Long story short, and I was like, well, the heartbreak of that, right? Like, you're a kid in grade 8 looking at putting down your dog or thousands and thousands of dollars on hip replacement at like a year or something. So I was like, I got to find out how to avoid this. Luckily, other natural measures worked and the dog was okay. But I was like, I never want to go through that again. What's the reason? Rottweilers are overbred.
Sure.
Rottweilers were... So that was the common thing coming back. They have hip dysplasia. They're overbred. They're bred for looks. I was a kid. Luckily, I listened. I went extreme. So I said, well, how do I combat that? I go, same answer was always coming back. You go in a rare breed that hasn't been ruined yet. Like I said, this was the 90s. Hip testing was kind of new. So it wasn't even like you could go through all these different kennels. So I was like, okay, rare breeds, that's cool. Well, internet wasn't a thing back then, so it was dog world ads, right? First dog world ad I picked up, I was like grade 10, I think. And I didn't like the bully dogs too much. They look cool. I was like, yeah, they're kind of cool, but like, kind of look like an English bulldog. I just remember thinking that, like, I don't like the pushed in face and stuff. And then I seen a dog, Twister. I think it was a little bit while later. I saw a lot of the standards, and I liked that look, the pit bulls. But it was Twister was the first dog, which was a red dog that stood out to me. Now, at that time, I didn't understand that there was two different bloodlines. Before mainly two different bloodlines, like the working and the classic, if you will. Or the standard, rather, in the classic. So Twister was a standard, and like I said, he was red. He stood out to me like crazy. I couldn't get the dog out of my mind. I'm like, I need a dog like that. Like, that is so. But they were in Connecticut. I'm in Canada. There was one breeder in Canada at the time, 4 hours from me, and he had bullies. So I remember my options were pretty slim back then. So at that point, the Rottweiler I knew she was getting up there a little older in age and starting to get worse. So I was like getting a little more urgent in my search, and I had noticed an ad for the ones that looked standard, what I've seen in dog world. And it was in Michigan. So the guy in Canada kind of blew me off because I was just a 17-year-old kid at this point now. So he blew me off, and I was probably rubbed him the wrong way. So luckily at the time he did, but so I called up the guy from Ann Arbor, and I had bugged him basically, so it was a little earlier actually in '97. I was bugging him for a while, and he finally agreed to. Told me, okay, come down. I can't guarantee you I'm going to sell you the dog, but you can come down. You got to bring your family with you, where the dog's going to live, mainly. Because I was pretty open. I said, the dog's going to be with me. So anyways, like, bring down your family, where mainly the dogs live and everything. So, like, I can't guarantee it. So I remember I'm like, I can't tell my parents this, right? Like, we're going down to pick up this puppy, and I'll just have wishful thinking and explain for 4 hours on the ride home and cross the border if we get turned away. So this breeder's name was Acorn Hills, Jim Edwards. It was the only one locally I could get. I didn't realize it was a pretty rare bloodline at the time. This is what I got. So we went down, and my mind was blown away. I just remember seeing these dogs come out and jump in. His one dog, Butch, the stud dog, the father of the dog I ended up getting, was hitting the mesh and the rim of a 10-foot basketball net. And, like I said, I've seen these dog world ads. I'm a young kid. You know what I mean? Right. I'm bugging these guys for like 2 years, 3 years. I'm calling all the other performance breeders out of dog world. Breeders still doing stuff, throwing out awesome product, Leatherneck, all these guys. And they were nice to me, but they were far, right, too, right? So I gathered all the info and ended up, so I remember the breeder telling me, too, he's like, first thing we kind of get story he tells me, he's like, yeah, the guys, you're lucky that the owner of this pup backed out or got turned away. He was pretty mad that he wanted one with an eye patch. And I'm like, oh, so I didn't realize at the time until years later, he turned him away, and the guy was from California. And that was from Ann Arbor, Michigan. So I was very fortunate to get this dog. Right. And like honestly, immediately, I remember thinking, like, seeing this pup, I was used to Rottweilers and just crappy, inner city type bred pit bulls in the area. Our city had banned pit bulls, which our province, BSL, moved into eventually, but our city was actually one of the first cities. So pit bulls were even kind of out of the question to own legally. And like I said, they were all garbage around here. So when I seen this dog and had him in my hands and brought him home to meet my Rottweiler, I was like, wow.
How did your Rottweiler react?
My Rottweiler was overwhelmed, and because of her age, she just was overwhelmed. Like, she tried the aggression, and the Bulldog wouldn't quit. And he was already a little older. He was already about almost 4 months. And I remember dropping him and saying to my bro, we gotta introduce him on neutral territory. I'm a 17-year-old kid. You're reading all these stupid things. You're hearing all this. And I remember my breeder. He was so gracious and patient with me. I don't know how he did it, because he is not known for that by the people that know him. So I remember introducing, I dropped this Bulldog, and I remember Jim telling me, he's like, now be careful. He's like, your Rottweiler, she's not going to be used to it. Like, he's going to want to go. And I remember, I know. And young kids can't, how it is. And it's so funny, like, years later, everything that these old timers tell you, they echo so true. But yeah, like, once again, there was, like I said, immediately I knew there was no way on earth I wanted any other breed. And I had research, like I said, it was dog world. So I had stuff from Caucasians at the time. There was one breeder in Brooklyn, MKY, I was talking to. My parents kind of indulged us a little more, so it was kind of, there was a lot of options out there, but like I said, it was that standard American Bulldog, and I I remember thinking, like, it triggered all those childhood memories. This is a dog. These are what a dog, when you're a kid and you see those pictures and you think dog, you think of a bulldog running along, fishing with a kid. You know what I mean? You have all those childhood type memories, and that was a dog to me. So it's like, it was in my mind. And like I said, when I seen it compared to the Rottweiler, and then I started bringing it around my friends' pit bulls, you know, and everything else. And this little 4-month-old was just owning everything. You know what I mean? And I knew immediately, I'm like, we got to get more. I took it to a dog show within him still being very young, and I didn't know what dog shows were about. I didn't understand any of this. At the time, I was partying, you know, I was probably 18, 19 at this point, wild into partying and stuff. So we took him to a dog show in Ohio, and that's when I started realizing that I have family down in Ohio, so we went anyway, and I thought, okay, well, we'll enter him at this dog show. And that's when I started realizing that we had something probably pretty special. Everyone's videoing him and taking pictures.
What was his name again?
His name was Bocce.
Okay.
And the reason my dad kind of, it's nostalgic. He calls it, Bocce's a European thing. For Hungarian, it's like respect, but it's generic. So like, you'd say like Andrew Bocce, or, you know, whatever the name would be, Jeff Bocce. It's kind of like a respect thing so my dad, when he doesn't remember people's name, it was always his thing. He's, hey, Botch, come here. Hey, Bocce, come here, right? So
okay.
We naturally had to call our male bulldog that. And that's actually something Rayburn and a lot of dog men I copied off too. They recycle names, you know what I mean? Dogs trigger past dogs. So the male I have now at my home that I'm putting my main focus into is named Bocce also. But like I said, yeah. So like that first dog was when I was at Parkman, and I realized that Bocce was getting such attention from the judges, breeders, everyone, and I'm just some young kid kind of thinking it's cool. So I was like, wow, we got to get more of the line, and that's when I realized that first dog, Twister, was associated with a kennel owned by a kennel named Templar. Templar was really, really big with colored dogs. They really moved forward color American Bulldogs. They're one of my main inspirations. They're who I follow. I don't find that I'll amount to I never would try to compare to what they've done. They had a lot of dogs, great kennel, awesome operation, and they had a lot of titled dogs. They did a lot of shows and stuff like that too, which is something that's a lot harder geographically for me. But they had an awesome program, and that's kind of what I followed. So they worked with a lot of the colored dogs that were like Twister from the 90s at that time, that went back to Leclerc and dogs from John Lichhart that had color, and some other standard colored dogs. So they really maintained that. And I remember too, like there was, like I said, those Dog World magazines and stuff, and there was another 2 dogs that my breeder Jim Edwards had sent to Australia that were kind of making a name out there, and one of them was colored also. They were Ting and Brutus. So I remember, like I said, you're a young teen, you look up to these dogs, and that's your bar, right? That's what you want to accomplish, right? So that became, after Parkman, Ohio, with Bocce, I had acquired a female at that time from Templar Kennels, the same place where Twister was from, and Twister was in this dog's pedigree also. So I was like so excited. Same color, the red with the buckskin mask.
Right.
This is before I understood about the politics. behind this. So, which is interesting because I didn't understand any of that until Parkman, and people were getting kicked out for having dogs too colored. So I remember being fired up and coming out of the show ring, and my crew, the people from Templar, John Lawrenson was there with Twister at Parkman, Ohio. I don't want to be quoted on the date. I believe it was early, I think it was 2000, maybe 2001. So like I said, so I came out and I was all fired. And I remember John Lichhart was, John Lawrenson, the guy from the owner of Templar and Twister. He was gracious enough to show me at the time how to handle Botch, my mail that I had gotten from Jim. Jim was also at the show, so I said, well, I'll hold Twister for a bit, because I was like a little kid. I was so in awe that this dog that I was like, wow, like I'm seeing it in front of me too, and I got a female like from its line. I thought, like, in my head, like, I'll be getting this every time I breed, you know?
Right,
Some young kid. Never thinking about all the work these people put in and all that training. You see the dogs doing Shih Tzu, and that was the first time I kind of really was exposed to too much of the protection. To me, all our buddies' dogs that they bit because they were kind of dangerous, and we needed them for that. You know what I mean? I didn't get this whole Shih Tzu thing and all this. So I was like, this is kind of cool with Bulldogs. But so yeah, like I was pretty in awe holding Twister too, and John. Like, it wasn't long. Luckily, they didn't trust me long enough. Probably with them. And John Lawrence was gracious enough to teach me how to kind of handle Botch. Botch did really well. I believe he placed in the top 3. I can't remember, because, like I said, to me, it wasn't a big... Shows were always about social for me. It's never about a ribbon. Never was. It was about connections and hanging out and having the dogs just chill. You know what I mean? If you walk to a show with a superior animal, all of the dogs at the show know, and all the people at the show know. It doesn't matter. I don't like, and I'm not trying to sound arrogant. Everyone thinks that. You know what I mean? But there's a different tone, in my opinion, of blood. Blood's something that when Rayburn taught me, in these old dog men. There's the dogs that, like, no other dog will stare off at. They act on innate characteristics. And in Bulldogs, American Bulldogs, it's something that is lost, you know. I remember at Park in Ohio, that show, like I said, that stood out to me, because there was a dog fight that broke out. There was almost a real fight we got in that kind of broke out. It made an impact, because I've seen all these old breeders, and I've seen these dogs, and I've seen some real cults, like some real cur examples, and I was just like, I didn't get it. I'm watching these magazines, I'm seeing these tough dogs, and I'm seeing these tail tuck, belly crawling, and like, okay, I'm not saying that every dog, this can happen from unsocialized dogs, other reasons, but I mean, if you're taking a dog to a show, and I've had some chain dogs I took to shows that didn't have the best confidence. My most accomplished chain dog, but I never made any excuses for the temperament. I never used the dog in my program. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. The history of the dog, the socialization. But when people are bringing these to dog shows, in my mind as a kid, right? And I didn't understand the whole thing about socializing too. But I saw, like, the line of dogs I was associated kind of with, and some of the good breeders that were there. And then I saw the rest of the breed, and I was, as a kid and as an 18-year-old, you're not into the politics. I wasn't on True Grit and all these early, chat boards and message boards that were kind of, or that sort of stuff that was going on. I was caught up in my own life of hustling and dealing with things, and I needed hard dogs, you know. After that time, I realized my bloodline in particular Templar was easing out of the game for whatever reasons at the time. My breeder was old, wasn't really breeding Jim Edwards. This bloodline was going to be lost. So I remember having that conversation, like almost in panic at the show, thinking like, this is like, I got to do this. I got to take up the reins. We got to do this. Like, I got to start breeding. So it was that same kind of drive and motivation, and that's when the bug got planted to me about Rayburn Stover. And I haven't told many people actually at all this. At the time when I heard it in Parkman, Ohio, Rayburn Stover, because Jim and a few others were talking about that being one of the oldest, purest genetics. Like, sounded like they were like advertising the Holy Grail, you know? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, man, I got to get a hold of this Rayburn or Stover guy. Because Rayburn, I thought, was a last name, and so I thought like Stover was a separate guy, right? I thought it was like a kennel or something. No. Rayburn, I'm Canadian. It's a name I never heard as a first name, right? So for quite a while, to me, that was a kennel and two separate people. So when I found out that Rayburn was one guy, and how many of the famous dogs that I looked at Dog World were kind of associated with him, I was like, wow, you know, this guy doesn't get the kind of credit and knowledge Alan Scott does, who, I mean, should too, but I mean, he just, Rayburn, you know, he was very unknown. So that's what kind of planted the bug about the Stover dogs too. And with my line of standard American Bulldogs that I was working with from Templar and the other like non-Stover standard blood, they have a tendency, if not properly selected, to be too dog aggressive. And there's some object sensitivity I noticed a bit. A few things I noticed that were just undesirable to me, and especially it showed up in more raw individuals that were kind of kept more as chain dogs. So that was the other reason that I kept on hearing from certain dogmen, including my mentor, Jim Edwards, at the time, he fell out of dogs, and Templar got out, and I still kept good contact with Jim the whole time. He was working on a good book, so he had collected a lot of material about the origins of American Bulldogs, traveled to kennels all over California. This is in the early 90s, mid-90s too. So he traveled, talked to Suregrip, which was a famous kennel at the time. He did just tons of research. And that's actually what led him to cut ties with everyone and to get out the game.
I got you.
So he was so mortified and upset at the hung papers, at the fake fairy tale stories, at the dishonest peddlers that he was exposing. And he's like, you know, you go to different kennels and the same stories on the same dogs are conflicting in dates and all this. He's like, how are you going to put stuff together? So everybody's, you know, championing. So I understand. I understood him, but it didn't relate to me. I still had that same, you know, I'm going to be that guy breeding those dogs. I want to produce stuff like that. So luckily I kind of had that foolish vision, which kept me driving. But I did notice once I met up with Rayburn and kind of got in the scene and tried to form an actual official kennel, I hadn't really noticed why Jim Edwards and a lot of the people were so turned off of the dog show scene and stuff like that with American Bulldogs. So, you know, and like I said, I started gaining more of an understanding about the color. I mean, by this point, I had already had dogs from Templar and colored dogs, numerous colored dogs, and I'm getting hate from people that don't know me over my dogs. And it's like, to me as a kid who was in your face kind of used to live in that lifestyle, you're hearing, like, it was so foreign to me. I'm like, oh, so do you have any oh, no, you're just Joe Blow with some fat pet. You know, I didn't understand that. So, but then you start seeing all the hatred from the color in the scene too. And then, like I said, it was something that to me I didn't focus on a whole lot, even because to me my colored dogs were something worth maintaining. I fell in love with them. I didn't care. I rocked it out. You know, that's what worked for me. All the theories about hog hunting at night, you know, losing a colored dog in the woods. Yeah, that's true. I mean, my mentality at the time was, well, I'm in Canada. I don't have hogs. My dogs need to be used to guard property, to guard factories, to like, it would be good if a dog is dark and can sneak up and nail you if you're going where you're not supposed to. To me, it didn't really seem like a deterrent, right? And I'm like, well, I've seen the dogs from Templar. They were all hog hunting. A lot of them were back when you were able to get catch dog titles and all that. So I'm like, these are dogs that were working in the woods and catching. So to me, it didn't really. I'm going to breed what works. It was always paint job. But like I said, as I met up then and realized I need to get this Stover blood. I need old stuff. I need pure stuff. I need stuff. For me, it was always also, once I realized that I had what I had, the genetics, and that it was pretty rare and pure. If it's rare and pure and garbage, I mean, and dying out, let it die out, right? Obviously. But when the Bulldogs have accomplished so much and it's dying out and it's so rare, to me, that added more value also.
Sure.
So I was fascinated in that fact, and I just couldn't because I was in close contact with Jim the whole time, and then I formed that friendship with Rayburn early on. And at the time, I didn't form a friendship with Rayburn or wanting to know him, realizing even how accomplished he was. Or what it was I could get from him. I just wanted cool dogs, man. You know, I wanted an outcross. I was following other dogmen who that formula worked for, right? So, that's kind of how that relayed. It was more of me wanting to maintain out of necessity and breed for necessity. Dogs that could keep me and my friends safe
100%.
in our areas.